Blood glistened on Elizabeth Keller's trembling hands as she stumbled through the door of the First Bank of Promise Creek. Her once pristine blue gown now torn and smudged with dust from the long journey. The bank manager's eyes widened as she collapsed against his polished mahogany desk, her breath coming in ragged gasps. "My husband," she panted, pushing a strand of chestnut hair from her face. "Robert took everything, our savings, my inheritance, all of it. He's gone." It was May 1875, and the town of Promise Creek, Colorado, had never witnessed such a scandal. 25-year-old Beatrice Keller had arrived from Boston just 18 months earlier, a new bride with dreams glittering in her eyes and a substantial fortune to her name. Now she stood destitute, betrayed by the man who had vowed to cherish her until death parted them. "Mrs. Keller, please compose yourself," the bank manager, Mr. Jenkins, said, glancing nervously toward the door where curious onlookers had begun to gather. "I'm afraid your husband withdrew the entire account 3 days ago. There's nothing left." Beatrice felt the room spin. "That can't be. My father's money, the trust. All gone, madam. He had the proper documentation. Your signature was on everything." "I never signed anything." She protested, then stopped abruptly as realization dawned. The nights Robert had plied her with wine, then presented papers he claimed were mere formalities for their new life out west. How blind she had been. Jenkins cleared his throat. "I'm truly sorry, Mrs. Keller, but legally there's nothing to be done. As your husband, he had every right. He had no right to steal from me," Beatrice hissed, drawing herself up despite her exhaustion. "Where am I to go? What am I to do?" The door to the bank swung open and the crowd parted. A tall figure stood silhouetted against the bright Colorado sun. Dust clung to his leather vest and denim trousers, and a worn Stetson cast shadows over a face weathered by sun and wind. As he stepped inside, Beatrice noticed his eyes green as summer grass after rain and fixed intently on her. "Sounds like you could use some help, madam," he said, his voice low and steady. "This doesn't concern you, Grant," Jenkins said stiffly. The man Grant ignored him, stepping closer to Beatrice. "Grant Kiernan," he said, touching the brim of his hat. "I couldn't help overhearing your predicament." "My predicament," Beatrice repeated bitterly, "is that I'm ruined. My husband has stolen everything I own." Grant studied her for a long moment. "Not everything," he finally said. "You still have yourself, your hands, your mind." His eyes traveled to her elegant fingers, now clenched in frustration. "Where I come from, that's enough to start with." Beatrice laughed without humor. "Easy for you to say, Mr. Kiernan. I was raised to host dinner parties and play the pianoforte, not to whatever it is you imagine I might do. My ranch needs help," he said simply. "I need someone to keep the books, manage the household. It's not glamorous work, but it's honest, room, board, and fair wages." Jenkins made a scandalized sound. "Mrs. Keller is a lady of quality." "She can't possibly. I'll take it," Beatrice interrupted, surprising herself as much as anyone. "When do I start?" Grant's weathered face remained impassive, but something flickered in those green eyes. "Right now, if you're willing, my wagon's outside." 2 hours later, Beatrice found herself jolting along a rutted dirt road, miles from town, seated beside the taciturn cowboy who had offered her salvation. Her few remaining possessions, a valise containing a spare dress, her mother's locket, and a dog-eared copy of Pride and Prejudice, were stowed behind them. "Why did you help me?" she finally asked, breaking the silence that had stretched between them since leaving Promise Creek. Grant kept his eyes on the trail ahead. "When I was 16, my father lost everything in a bad investment. A man offered him work when no one else would. Saved our family." He glanced at her briefly. "Sometimes people just need a chance, and that's all this is, a chance." "Yes, madam." Nothing more. But as the wagon crested a hill and Beatrice caught her first glimpse of Kiernan Ranch spread out below a modest but well-kept house, several outbuildings, and pastures dotted with cattle, she couldn't help but feel this was more than just a chance. It was the beginning of something she couldn't yet name. "It's not what you're used to," Grant said, misinterpreting her silence for disappointment. "No," Beatrice agreed, watching a group of cowboys driving cattle toward a distant pasture. "It's nothing like what I'm used to." She turned to him, resolve hardening within her. But I'm not the woman I was yesterday either. Grant's expression softened slightly. Well then, Mrs. Keller, welcome to your new beginning. The first week at Kiernan Ranch tested Beatrice in ways she never imagined. Her hands, once soft and pampered, developed blisters from scrubbing floors and washing linens. Her back ached from bending over the cookstove. The ranch accounts, which Grant had entrusted to her after discovering she had a head for figures, required hours of concentrated work to untangle. Yet each night, as she collapsed onto the narrow bed in the small room off the kitchen that was now hers, Beatrice felt something she hadn't experienced in months: pride. Here, her worth wasn't measured by her dowry or social connections, but by what she could accomplish with her own two hands. Grant remained a mystery. He rose before dawn and often returned after she'd retired, exchanging only necessary words with her. The ranch hands Miguel, Hank, and young Joey were more forthcoming, especially at mealtimes when they praised her improving cooking skills with enthusiasm that made her blush. Boss never had food this good, Hank declared one evening, helping himself to a second serving of beef stew. Before you came, it was beans and hardtack most days. Mr. Kiernan doesn't seem to notice, Beatrice observed, glancing at Grant, who ate methodically at the head of the table. He notices, Miguel said with a knowing smile, he just doesn't say much. As if to prove them wrong, Grant looked up from his plate. The stew is good, he said. Thank you, 3 simple words, yet Beatrice felt her face flush with pleasure. You're welcome. Later that night, as she reviewed the ranch ledgers by lamplight, Grant appeared in the doorway of the small office. You should rest, he said. It's late, Beatrice shook her head. I've almost finished reconciling last month's accounts. Did you know you've been losing money on the Hendricks contract? He's been shorting you on payments for 3 months. Grant stepped into the room, his brow furrowed. Show me. She pointed to the columns of figures she'd meticulously copied and calculated. Here and here. He leaned over her shoulder, close enough that she could smell leather and pine soap. You've got a good eye, he said after studying the numbers. I missed this entirely. In Boston, my father insisted I learn bookkeeping despite my mother's objections. He said a woman should always understand her financial situation. Beatrice's voice caught. I should have heeded that lesson better with Robert, Grant straightened. Your husband, he's a fool, Beatrice corrected. He was my husband. I filed divorce papers before leaving Boston. Something shifted in Grant's expression, surprise, perhaps, or respect. That took courage. No, she said quietly. Staying would have taken courage. Leaving was survival. The next morning, Grant announced he was riding to town to confront Hendricks about the payment discrepancies. I'll be back by nightfall, he told Beatrice as she handed him a packet of sandwiches for the journey. Be careful, she said automatically, then felt foolish. This man had survived the Civil War and years on the frontier. He hardly needed her concern, but Grant nodded solemnly. Always am. As promised, he returned that evening, dust-covered but satisfied. Hendricks paid what he owed plus interest, he announced, placing a canvas bag of coins on the kitchen table. Said he didn't expect anyone would notice. People rarely do, Beatrice replied, until someone starts paying attention. Grant studied her thoughtfully. You're not what I expected, Mrs. Keller. Beatrice, she corrected. After all, I work for you now. Beatrice, he repeated, her name sounding different in his deep voice. And you don't just work for me, we're partners in this ranch now, she blinked. Partners, you've earned it. Your bookkeeping saved us money today and your cooking's keeping the men happy. The place runs better with you here. Thank you. Emotion threatened to overwhelm her and she turned to stir the pot of beans on the stove. Grant cleared his throat. There's a social in town Saturday. Dancing, food. Might be good for you to meet some folks, make some friends. Beatrice turned back in surprise. Are you suggesting I attend? I'm suggesting we attend, if you'd like. The warmth in his green eyes made her heart skip strangely. I'd like that very much. Saturday arrived clear and warm, a perfect late spring day. Beatrice spent the morning fretting over her appearance, finally settling on her one good dress, a lavender cotton with modest lace trim. She'd washed and pressed it carefully, but it still marked her as different from the local women with their practical calico. When Grant saw her step onto the porch, something flickered across his usually stoic face. "You look lovely," he said simply. The drive to town was pleasant, with Grant pointing out landmarks and sharing stories of the area's history. Beatrice found herself laughing at his dry observations about the locals they'd be meeting, a sound that seemed to please him. "You should laugh more often," he commented. "It suits you." The social was held in Promise Creek's newly constructed town hall, a simple but impressive building with polished wooden floors perfect for dancing. Beatrice felt eyes on her as Grant escorted her inside, and whispers followed in their wake. "Pay them no mind," Grant murmured. "Small towns run on gossip. What are they saying?" she asked, though she could guess. "Nothing worth repeating," he answered firmly. "Would you like some punch?" As Grant fetched refreshments, Beatrice was approached by a woman about her age with a kind smile and practical brown dress. "You must be Mrs. Keller," she said. "I'm Hannah Wright, the school teacher. Please call me Beatrice," she replied, grateful for the friendly face. "I've been hoping to meet you," Hannah continued. "We don't get many new ladies in Promise Creek, especially ones who have caused such a stir." Beatrice tensed. "A stir?" Hannah laughed. "Oh, working for the most eligible bachelor in the county, absolutely. Half the women here have set their caps for Grant Kiernan for years, but he's never shown interest. Then you arrive, and suddenly he's bringing you to socials." "It's not like that," Beatrice protested. "We're business partners, nothing more, if you say so," Hannah replied with a knowing smile. "Though from the way he's looking at you right now, I'd say there might be more to the story." Beatrice glanced across the room to find Grant's eyes indeed fixed on her, his expression unreadable. When their gazes met, he didn't look away. The evening progressed pleasantly. Beatrice danced with several of the local men, including the sheriff, the blacksmith, and young doctor Fowler, who seemed particularly attentive until Grant cut in during their second dance. "You're popular tonight," Grant observed as he guided her expertly around the floor. "The novelty of a new face, I'm sure," Beatrice replied. "You dance very well, Mr. Kiernan," my mother insisted. Said no son of hers would stomp around like a buffalo. A rare smile touched his lips. "And I thought we agreed on first names, Beatrice." The way he said her name made her miss a step. Grant's arm tightened around her waist to steady her, and for a moment they were pressed closer than propriety allowed. Beatrice felt heat rush to her face. "Sorry," she murmured. "Don't be," he replied softly. The music ended, and Grant reluctantly released her. Before he could speak again, the town mayor climbed onto the small stage and called for attention. "Folks, we've got a special visitor tonight," he announced. "Mr. James Harrington from the Colorado and Western Railroad is here to share some exciting news." A well-dressed man with a neat beard took the mayor's place. "Ladies and gentlemen, I'm pleased to announce that the C&W Railroad has finalized plans to extend our line through Promise Creek. Construction begins next month, and we expect trains to be running by year's end." The room erupted in cheers. A railroad connection would transform Promise Creek from an isolated frontier town to a connected hub of commerce. "This changes everything," Grant said, his eyes alight with possibilities. "Our cattle could go straight to market in Denver, maybe even Chicago." Beatrice felt his excitement. "The ranch could expand." "Exactly. We'll need to increase the herd, maybe buy more land." He took her hand impulsively. "This could be our chance, Beatrice." His touch and his words, "our chance," sent a tremor through her. Before she could respond, a commotion at the entrance drew everyone's attention. A man stood in the doorway, swaying slightly, his expensive suit dusty from travel. Beatrice's blood ran cold as she recognized him. "Robert," she whispered, Grant's hand tightened on hers. "Your husband." "Ex-husband," she corrected automatically, though the divorce wasn't yet final. Robert's bleary eyes scanned the room until they found her. "There you are, my darling wife," he called, his cultured Boston accent slurring slightly. "How touching to find you enjoying yourself while I've been searching high and low." The room fell silent as he staggered toward them. Grant moved protectively in front of Beatrice. "You're not welcome here," he said quietly. Robert laughed. "And who might you be? My wife's latest conquest." "She does have a talent for wrapping men around her finger." "That's enough," the sheriff intervened, stepping between them. "Sir, you're disturbing the peace." "I'm merely retrieving what's mine," Robert insisted. "My wife has run away, and I've come to take her home." I'm not your wife anymore, Beatrice said, finding her voice at last. And I'm not going anywhere with you. Robert's handsome face darkened. You signed those papers under duress. They're not valid. Everything you have still belongs to me by law, including yourself. Grant's stance shifted, his body coiled with tension. Sheriff, I suggest you remove this man before I do, the sheriff nodded. Mr. Keller, you'd best come with me. Sleep it off in my jail and we can sort this out in the morning. For a moment, Robert looked ready to resist, but then he smiled coldly. Very well, but this isn't over, Beatrice, not by a long shot. He allowed the sheriff to escort him out, turning once to call back, I always collect what's owed to me. The social resumed slowly, but the joy had gone out of the evening. Grant insisted on taking Beatrice home immediately. Are you all right? He asked as they drove through the darkness. No, she admitted, her voice shaking. I thought I was free of him. What did he mean about collecting what's owed? Beatrice sighed. After I discovered he'd stolen my inheritance, I confronted him. He claimed he'd invested it all in a mining venture, a sure thing, he said. When I told him I was leaving, he swore he'd get it all back and more. Do you believe him? No, Robert's always been a gambler and a dreamer. If he ever had the money, it's gone now. She shivered despite the mild night. What worries me is what he'll do next. He's not a man who accepts defeat gracefully. Grant was silent for a long moment. You're safe at the ranch, he finally said. I won't let him harm you. Something in his tone made Beatrice look at him closely. In the moonlight, his profile was strong and determined. Thank you, she whispered. That night, sleep eluded her. Every creak of the old ranch house made her start, imagining Robert had somehow found his way there. Near dawn, exhausted, she gave up and went to the kitchen to start breakfast early. To her surprise, Grant was already there, coffee brewing on the stove. You couldn't sleep either, she asked. He shook his head. Been thinking about what to do about your husband. Ex-husband, she corrected firmly. A ghost of a smile touched his lips. Ex-husband. I sent one of the boys into town at first light with a message for my lawyer in Denver. He'll be here tomorrow to help sort this out legally. Beatrice felt a rush of gratitude. You didn't have to do that. Yes, I did. Grant's eyes held her steadily. Beatrice, I need to say something. Her heart quickened. Yes. Before he could continue, hoofbeats sounded outside, approaching rapidly. Grant moved to the window, his body tensing. Stay here, he ordered, grabbing his rifle from above the door and stepping onto the porch. Beatrice ignored his instruction, following close behind. The ranch hand they'd sent to town, young Joey, was galloping toward the house, his horse lathered with sweat. Boss, he called as he reined in. There's trouble in town. That fancy man Keller, he's filed legal papers claiming half ownership of this ranch. What? Grant's voice was dangerously quiet. Says his wife's working here means she's got a claim, and as her husband, so does he. Joey's young face was flushed with indignation. Sheriff sent me to warn you, he's coming out with the papers. Beatrice felt the world tilt beneath her feet. This is my fault, she whispered. He's using me to get to you. Grant turned to her, his expression fierce. No, this is his doing, not yours. To Joey, he said, ride to the north pasture, get Miguel and Hank back here, then go to the Matthews place and ask David to come. He was a lawyer back east before homesteading here. As Joey galloped off, Grant guided Beatrice back inside. We'll fight this, he assured her. He has no legitimate claim. You don't understand Robert, she said, sinking into a chair. He's charming, persuasive. He convinced my father I was the perfect son-in-law, convinced me he was the perfect husband, convinced the bank to give him access to my trust fund. If there's a legal loophole, he'll find it. Grant knelt before her, taking her trembling hands in his. Beatrice, look at me. When she did, the intensity in his green eyes stole her breath. I built this ranch from nothing, worked 15 years to get here. I won't lose it or you to a con man from Boston. Or me. She repeated, uncertain she'd heard correctly. His gaze didn't waver. When I offered you that job in town, it wasn't just charity. There was something about you, your courage, your dignity despite everything. These past weeks, watching you build a new life here, I've come to. He paused, seeming to search for the right words. I care for you, Beatrice. More than I should, perhaps. Joy and fear warred within her. Grant, the sound of approaching horses interrupted her again. This time it was the sheriff's party, 4 riders in all, including Robert sitting tall on a borrowed horse. Looking smug, Grant stood, his expression hardening. "Stay inside if you want," he told Beatrice. "You don't have to face him." "No," she said, rising with newfound determination. "I'm done hiding from Robert Keller." They stepped onto the porch together as the riders dismounted. Robert's eyes narrowed when he saw them standing side by side. "How domestic," he sneered. "Playing ranch wife suits you, darling. State your business and be gone," Grant said coldly. The sheriff looked uncomfortable as he handed over a folded document. "Sorry about this, Grant. He filed the papers with Judge Wilson this morning." Grant scanned the legal document, his jaw tightening. "This is nonsense. No judge in his right mind would uphold it." "Perhaps not," Robert agreed smoothly, "but it will take months to sort out in court. During which time, as part owner, I'll have full access to the ranch, its operations, and its profits." "You're no owner here," Grant growled. "But I am," Beatrice interjected suddenly, an idea forming. "Isn't that right, Robert? Your claim is based on my supposed ownership interest." Robert's smile faltered slightly. "As my wife, but what if I have no interest to claim?" She turned to Grant. "Mr. Kiernan, I hereby formally renounce any ownership interest in Kiernan Ranch. I am merely an employee here, nothing more." David Matthews, who had arrived during the confrontation, stepped forward. "I'll witness that statement, and we can have it notarized in town today." Robert's face darkened. "You can't do that." "I just did," Beatrice replied calmly. "Now there's nothing for you to claim through me." "This isn't over," Robert snarled. "You've stolen from me, Beatrice, my dignity, my future. One way or another, I'll get what's mine." "The only thief here is you," Grant said, stepping closer to Robert, his voice dangerously low. "Now get off my land before I forget there's a sheriff present." Robert glanced at the other men, clearly calculating his odds. Finally, he remounted his horse. "You haven't seen the last of me," he promised before wheeling his mount around and galloping away. The sheriff sighed. "I'll keep an eye on him, Grant." Man like that usually moves on when he sees there's no easy money to be had. After the others had left, Beatrice and Grant stood alone on the porch, the morning sun now high above them. "That was quick thinking," Grant said finally. Renouncing any claim, Beatrice nodded, suddenly uncertain. Had she misunderstood his earlier words? It seemed the simplest solution. Simple, yes. He turned to face her fully, but not necessarily what I want. Her heart skipped. "What do you want, Grant?" to finish what I was saying before we were interrupted. He took a step closer. "Beatrice, when I said I've come to care for you, that was an understatement. These past weeks, watching you rebuild your life, seeing your strength and determination, I've fallen in love with you." The world seemed to stop. "Love, yes." His voice was steady, but she could see vulnerability in his eyes. "I know it's too soon. You're still healing from betrayal, still finding your way. I don't expect anything in return, but after seeing Robert today, I needed you to know the truth." Beatrice felt tears welling in her eyes. "When Robert took everything, I thought my life was over. I never imagined I'd find something so much more valuable here." She reached for his hand. "I love you too, Grant. It terrifies me, but it's true." The joy that transformed his face was like sunrise breaking over the mountains. Slowly, giving her every chance to pull away, he lowered his mouth to hers. The kiss was gentle at first, then deepened as Beatrice wound her arms around his neck, pouring months of loneliness and fear into the connection between them. When they finally broke apart, both breathless, Grant rested his forehead against hers. "I meant what I said in town. This is our chance, the railroad, the ranch, a future together, if you want it." "I do," she whispered, "but Robert won't give up easily." "Let him try," Grant said with quiet confidence. "What we're building here is stronger than his schemes." The next few weeks passed in a blur of activity. Grant's lawyer arrived from Denver and helped file counter motions against Robert's claims. The ranch preparations for the coming railroad expansion kept everyone working from dawn till dusk, expanding pastures, increasing the breeding stock, negotiating contracts for future cattle shipments. Through it all, Beatrice and Grant's relationship deepened. They worked side by side during the day, and in the evenings, they talked for hours on the porch, sharing stories of their pasts and dreams for the future. His kisses grew more passionate, and more than once, Beatrice had to remind herself that propriety demanded they wait until her divorce was final and they were properly wed. Married, Grant mused one evening as they watched the sunset from the porch swing. Never thought I'd see the day. Beatrice leaned against his shoulder. Having second thoughts, cowboy, he chuckled, the sound rumbling pleasantly against her ear. Not a chance, just amazed at how life changes. 6 months ago, I was resigned to building this ranch alone. Now I can't imagine it without you. 6 months ago, I thought I knew what wealth was, she replied. Now I understand it's not about money at all. The peaceful moment was shattered by the sound of a gunshot in the distance, followed by shouts from the direction of the cattle pasture. Grant was on his feet instantly, grabbing his rifle. "Stay here," he ordered, running toward the commotion. This time, Beatrice obeyed, her heart pounding as she watched Grant disappear into the gathering dusk. Minutes later, more shots rang out and flames suddenly leapt up from one of the far pastures. "Fire!" she heard someone yell. "The south pasture is burning." Without hesitation, Beatrice ran to the well, beginning to fill buckets. The ranch hands who weren't fighting the fire began a bucket brigade, with Beatrice working alongside them. The smoke burned her lungs and stung her eyes, but she kept working, terror gripping her heart each time she remembered the gunshots that had preceded the fire. It was nearly midnight before the fire was contained, having burned nearly 10 acres of grazing land. As the last embers were being doused, Beatrice finally spotted Grant, his face blackened with soot, conferring with Miguel near the burned fence line. She ran to him. "Thank God you're safe." "What happened?" Grant's expression was grim. "Someone shot at Hank while he was checking the cattle, then set fire to the dry grass. Cattle spooked and broke through the fence. We'll be rounding up strays for days." "Someone or Robert?" Beatrice asked, already knowing the answer. "Hank caught a glimpse of a man in a city suit," Grant confirmed. "Too dark to be certain, but it was him," she said with certainty. "This is my fault. He's targeting the ranch because of me." Grant took her by the shoulders. "Stop that. Robert Keller is responsible for his own actions, not you." His voice softened. "We'll get through this, Beatrice, together." Next morning brought news that the sheriff had arrested Robert in town, drunk and boasting about teaching that cowboy a lesson. But without direct evidence linking him to the fire, they could only hold him for public intoxication a day or two at most. "We need to end this," Beatrice said, as she and Grant discussed the situation over breakfast. "As long as Robert thinks he can get to you through me, he'll keep causing trouble." "I've been thinking the same," Grant admitted. "The lawyer says your divorce should be final next month, but Robert could do a lot of damage before then," she finished for him. Grant nodded grimly. "I've sent for help. An old friend from my army days, he works for the Pinkerton Detective Agency now. If anyone can find evidence of Robert's crimes, it's him." 3 days later, the Pinkerton agent arrived, a quiet, observant man named Samuel Cooper. He listened carefully as Beatrice recounted her history with Robert, including details of the financial transactions and the trust fund. "Most interesting," Cooper said when she finished. "Mrs. Keller, did your husband ever mention investments in the Silverton area?" Beatrice frowned. "Yes, he claimed he'd invested my money in a silver mine there, the Golden Promise, I believe he called it." Cooper nodded thoughtfully. "As it happens, there was a scheme involving a fictitious mine by that name. Several Boston investors lost substantial sums." He tapped his notebook. "With your permission, I'd like to investigate whether your husband was involved in that fraud." "Do whatever you need to," Grant told him. "We want this resolved." As Cooper departed for Silverton, life at the ranch settled into an uneasy routine. Robert remained in town, having taken a room at the hotel. Occasionally, he was seen watching the ranch from a distance, but he made no further direct moves against them. One afternoon, Beatrice was returning from delivering a pie to Hannah Wright when she spotted a familiar figure lurking near the road to the ranch. Heart-pounding, she urged her horse to a faster pace, but Robert stepped into the road, forcing her to rein in. "Going somewhere in a hurry, darling?" he asked, his handsome face twisted in a cruel smile. "Let me pass, Robert," she said firmly, fighting to keep her voice steady. He grabbed her horse's bridle. "Not until we talk. You've humiliated me, Beatrice, made me a laughingstock." You did that to yourself when you stole from me and ran, she retorted, his grip tightened. I was investing in our future. The mine would have made us rich beyond imagining. There was no mine, was there? Just another one of your schemes. Something dangerous flashed in his eyes. Come back to me, Beatrice. We can start over. I've learned my lesson. No, she said simply. I've found something real here, Robert, something you could never give me. His face darkened. That cowboy, you think he loves you. He only wants what all men want, your body in his bed and control of your money. You're wrong. Grant loves me for who I am, not what I have. Robert laughed bitterly. How poetic. Let's see how long that love lasts when I burn his precious ranch to the ground. Fear shot through her. The sheriff already suspects you for the first fire. You won't get away with it again. Won't I? He reached for her, trying to pull her from the saddle. Perhaps I'll take you with me instead. You're still my wife, after all. Beatrice kicked out, catching him in the shoulder. As he stumbled back, she wheeled her horse around and galloped toward the ranch, Robert's curses fading behind her. Grant was furious when she told him what had happened. That's it. I'm going to town to deal with him once and for all. No, Beatrice caught his arm. That's what he wants, to provoke you into doing something that will get you arrested. We need to be smarter than him. Before Grant could respond, they heard a rider approaching. It was Cooper, the Pinkerton man, looking pleased with himself. I have news, he announced, dismounting, and evidence. Over dinner, Cooper laid out what he'd discovered. Robert hadn't just stolen Beatrice's money, he'd been running confidence schemes across Colorado, using various aliases. The fictitious Golden Promise mine had defrauded investors of over $50,000. Most importantly, Cooper concluded, I've located 3 of his victims who are willing to testify against him. The federal marshal is preparing charges for wire fraud and mail fraud, serious offenses that carry prison terms. Relief washed over Beatrice. So it's over, almost, Cooper said. The marshal will arrive tomorrow to arrest him. Until then, I suggest you both stay here where it's safe. That night, Beatrice couldn't sleep. The thought of Robert finally facing justice should have brought comfort, but instead she felt a creeping dread. Robert was a cornered animal now at his most dangerous. Her fears proved justified when Joey burst into the house before dawn, shouting for Grant. Fire! The barn's on fire! The next hours passed in a nightmarish blur. Despite their best efforts, the barn couldn't be saved. As dawn broke, they stood amid the smoldering ruins, counting their blessings that no lives, human or animal, had been lost. It was deliberate, Grant said grimly, holding up a broken lantern. Someone threw this through the window. Robert, Beatrice whispered. Cooper, who had joined the firefighting efforts, nodded. Most likely, but this time he's made a critical mistake. He pointed to hoofprints leading away from the barn. These tracks are distinctive. His horse has a chipped front shoe, evidence the marshal can use. Grant squared his shoulders. I'm not waiting for the marshal. Robert Keller has threatened what's mine for the last time. Before anyone could stop him, he mounted his horse and galloped toward town, Cooper and Miguel racing to follow him. Left behind, Beatrice paced anxiously, torn between fear for Grant and fury at Robert. Finally, unable to stand the waiting, she saddled her own horse and headed to town, ignoring Hank's protests. Promise Creek was in an uproar when she arrived. A crowd had gathered outside the saloon where she quickly learned Grant had confronted Robert. The 2 men had exchanged blows before the sheriff separated them, taking both to his office to cool down. Beatrice pushed through the crowd to the sheriff's office, where she found Grant sitting stiffly in a chair, a cut above his eye but otherwise unharmed. Robert sat across the room, sporting what would soon be an impressive black eye. Ah, the lady of the hour, Robert sneered when he saw her. That's enough, the sheriff warned. Mrs. Keller, perhaps you can talk some sense into these 2 before I have to lock them both up. Before Beatrice could respond, Cooper entered with a tall, stern-looking man wearing a federal marshal's badge. Marshal Davis, Cooper said by way of introduction. He's here for Mr. Keller. Robert's face drained of color. What is this? The marshal stepped forward. Robert Keller, you're under arrest for multiple counts of fraud, theft, and most recently arson. You'll be transported to Denver to await trial. This is absurd, Robert protested. You have no evidence, on the contrary, Cooper interrupted. We have signed statements from 3 of your victims, financial records showing your involvement in the Golden Promise scheme, and he held up a muddy boot, which matches perfectly the prints found leading away from Kiernan Ranch's barn this morning. As the marshal handcuffed a sputtering Robert, Beatrice felt a strange mixture of emotions: relief, vindication, but also a profound sadness for the man she had once loved enough to marry. "Why, Robert?" she asked quietly. "Was it always just about money?" For a moment, something like regret flickered across his face. "Not at first," he admitted. "But I'm not built for ordinary life, Beatrice. I needed more excitement, luxury, admiration, things a simple existence could never provide." Grant stepped to Beatrice's side, taking her hand. "Then you never really saw what was in front of you," he said. "There's nothing simple about building something real." Robert's gaze shifted between them, his expression hardening again. "How touching. Enjoy your cowboy and his dirt farm, Beatrice. When you tire of calluses and cow dung, don't come looking for me." "I won't," she said with quiet certainty. "Goodbye, Robert." As the marshal led Robert away, Grant squeezed her hand. "Are you all right?" Beatrice nodded, watching her past disappear through the door. "Yes. For the first time in a very long time, I truly am." Summer turned to autumn, and autumn to winter. The railroad construction progressed on schedule, bringing new opportunities and challenges. With Robert safely awaiting trial in Denver, Beatrice's divorce was finalized without further complication. The barn was rebuilt, bigger and stronger than before. On Christmas Eve, with snow falling gently outside, Grant led Beatrice to the hearth in the ranch house, their home, and knelt before her. "I promised once that I'd build you riches with my hands," he said, taking a small wooden box from his pocket. "I meant it then, and I mean it now." He opened the box to reveal a simple gold ring set with a small diamond. "Not as grand as what you had in Boston, but it's perfect," Beatrice whispered, tears filling her eyes. "Because it comes from you. Beatrice Keller, will you marry me, build a life with me, face whatever comes, good or bad, together?" "Yes," she said without hesitation. 1,000 times yes. They were married on New Year's Day, 1876, in the Promise Creek Church, with the entire town in attendance. Hannah stood as Beatrice's maid of honor, and Miguel as Grant's best man. Even Cooper came from Denver for the occasion, bringing news that Robert had pleaded guilty to all charges and would serve at least 10 years in prison. "Good riddance," Grant said when he heard, then immediately apologized to Beatrice. "Don't," she told him. "Robert made his choices. We've made ours." As spring arrived, bringing new life to the ranch, Beatrice discovered she was expecting their first child. Grant's joy was boundless. He insisted on building a cradle with his own hands and spent hours talking about the future their child would have. "Boy or girl, they'll inherit the best ranch in Colorado," he declared proudly as they sat on their porch swing, watching the sunset paint the mountains gold. Beatrice smiled, her hand resting on her growing belly. "And they'll know the true meaning of wealth, not gold or property, but love and honest work." "Speaking of property," Grant said, pulling a document from his pocket, "this came today. The deed to the Wilson parcel adjoining our east pasture. It's ours now, another 300 acres. Beatrice examined the paper, noting both their names listed as owners. "Our legacy grows. In more ways than one," Grant agreed, placing his hand over hers on her belly. "When I saw you that day in the bank, so fierce despite everything you'd lost, I never imagined where we'd end up." "Neither did I," Beatrice admitted. "I thought I was ruined, that my life was over. Instead, it was just beginning." Grant kissed her tenderly. "Robert took your fortune and fled," he said, "but I meant what I promised. I've built you riches with my hands." Beatrice leaned into his embrace, feeling the strength of the man who had saved her in more ways than one. "The greatest riches," she whispered, "are the ones we've built together." As the first train whistle sounded in the distance, the inaugural run of the Colorado and Western to Promise Creek, they rose together to watch its approach, their future stretching before them as vast and promising as the western sky. By autumn of 1877, Kiernan Ranch had become one of the most prosperous cattle operations in Colorado. The railroad connection had transformed their business, allowing them to ship cattle directly to eastern markets at premium prices. Grant and Beatrice reinvested most of their profits, expanding their herd and purchasing additional grazing lands. Their son, James, born that spring, was a healthy, robust baby with his father's green eyes and his mother's determination. Beatrice had recovered quickly from childbirth and now managed both the household and the ranch's finances with impressive efficiency, freeing Grant to focus on the cattle operation. "I never thought I'd see the day when Kiernan Ranch employed 15 men," Grant remarked one evening as he reviewed the payroll Beatrice had prepared. "My father would be amazed." Beatrice smiled, gently rocking James in her arms. "He'd be proud, too. You've built something remarkable here." "We've built it," Grant corrected, watching his wife and son with undisguised adoration. "I couldn't have done this without you." The railroad had brought other changes to Promise Creek as well. The town had nearly doubled in size, with new businesses opening monthly. Hannah Wright, now married to young Dr. Fowler, had expanded her school to accommodate the growing population. Miguel had opened a small restaurant serving Mexican cuisine that had become a local favorite. One crisp October morning, as Beatrice was hanging laundry while James napped nearby in a basket, a fancy carriage pulled up to the ranch house. She shaded her eyes, not recognizing the elegant vehicle or its driver. A distinguished-looking older gentleman stepped down, removing his hat as he approached. "Mrs. Kiernan, Beatrice Keller?" "Yes," she replied cautiously, moving protectively toward James. "Forgive the intrusion. My name is William Sinclair from Sinclair Banking in Denver." He smiled kindly. "I believe you were once a client of our Boston branch under your maiden name." Beatrice's heart skipped. "Yes, my father banked with Sinclairs, but that was years ago, before your first husband absconded with your trust fund," Sinclair finished gently. "That's actually why I'm here." "May we speak privately? Perhaps your husband should join us as well." Grant was summoned from the south pasture, arriving dusty and concerned. After introductions, they settled in the parlor, with James now awake and contentedly playing in his father's arms. "I'll come directly to the point," Sinclair said. "As you may know, Robert Keller was convicted of multiple counts of fraud and is currently serving his sentence in the federal penitentiary." "We're aware," Grant said tersely. "What does this have to do with us?" Sinclair opened his leather portfolio. During the investigation, authorities recovered substantial assets hidden by Mr. Keller investments, property, and cash, much of which has been proven to originate from Mrs. Kiernan's trust fund. Beatrice gasped. "My father's money." "A significant portion of it, yes." Sinclair handed her a document. "This details the recovered amounts attributed to your original funds. After legal fees and restitution to other victims, approximately $62,000 remains. As the rightful owner, it's being returned to you." The room fell silent. $62,000 was an enormous sum, more than many men earned in a lifetime. I don't know what to say," Beatrice finally managed. Grant looked equally stunned. "We thought that money was lost forever." "Fortunately not," Sinclair replied. "The funds have been deposited in a new account at our Denver branch in Mrs. Kiernan's name alone, as per legal requirement. However, you may of course manage it as you see fit." He hesitated. "There is one more thing." From his portfolio, he withdrew a small package wrapped in brown paper. "This was found in Mr. Keller's safe deposit box. The authorities determined it rightfully belongs to you." With trembling fingers, Beatrice unwrapped the package. Inside was a velvet jeweler's box. When she opened it, tears sprang to her eyes. "My mother's pearls," she whispered. "I thought they were lost forever." Grant shifted James to one arm so he could place his other hand on Beatrice's shoulder. "Are you all right?" She nodded, touching the lustrous strand reverently. "These were her wedding pearls. She gave them to me the day I married, before she passed. When Robert took everything, I assumed he'd sold them." "Apparently not," Sinclair observed. "Some things, it seems, have too much value to be simply sold for cash." After the banker departed, Beatrice and Grant sat in stunned silence, the bank documents on the table between them. $62,000, Grant finally said, shaking his head in disbelief. "What will you do with it?" Beatrice looked up in surprise. "What will we do with it, you mean?" "No," Grant said firmly. "That money is yours, Beatrice, from your family, your past." "And you are my present and future," she replied without hesitation. "Everything I have is yours, just as everything you have is mine. We're partners, remember?" The look of love that crossed Grant's face made her heart swell. "I remember," he said softly, "every day." James chose that moment to let out a happy gurgle, reaching for the pearls still in Beatrice's hand. They both laughed as she gently moved them out of his reach. "These will be yours someday, little one," she told him. "For your bride, perhaps?" "So," Grant said, returning to the matter at hand. "What will we do with this unexpected windfall?" Beatrice considered. "First, I'd like to establish a trust for James and any future children we might have." "Future children?" Grant's eyes lit up. "I like the sound of that," she smiled. "Second, I think we should invest in the ranch, perhaps that new breeding stock you've been researching. And the irrigation system for the east pasture," Grant nodded, clearly pleased with her thinking. "And third," Beatrice's expression grew more serious. "I'd like to establish a fund for women in situations like mine was who need to escape bad marriages or have lost everything through no fault of their own. A fresh start fund, administered through Hannah's church, perhaps." Grant set James down on a blanket and moved to kneel before his wife, taking her hands in his. "Have I told you lately how extraordinary you are, Beatrice Keller?" "Not since breakfast," she teased. He laughed, then grew serious again. "When you arrived here with nothing, I promised I'd build you riches with my hands. Now you have your fortune back, and I wonder." "Wonder what?" she prompted when he hesitated. "If you regret these years of hard work and simple living, if having your money back makes you miss your old life." Beatrice cupped his face in her hands. "Grant Kiernan, you built me something far more precious than a fortune. You built me a home, a family, a life filled with purpose and love." She kissed him tenderly. "No amount of money could ever compare to that." Grant pulled her into his arms, holding her close. "When Robert took your fortune, it led you to me," he murmured against her hair. "Maybe I should thank him someday," Beatrice laughed, "perhaps from a safe distance." As they held each other, James crawling contentedly at their feet, Beatrice reflected on the strange journey that had brought her here. The betrayal that had seemed like an ending had actually been a beginning. The loss that had felt like ruin had been the foundation for something far more valuable. In the years that followed, the Kiernan family continued to flourish. Their wealth grew, both in material terms and in the richness of their family life. James was joined by twin sisters, Emma and Charlotte, in 1879, and another son, William, in 1882. The ranch expanded to become one of the largest cattle operations in the state, employing dozens of workers and supporting numerous families. Beatrice's Fresh Start Fund helped countless women rebuild their lives, becoming a model that was replicated in other communities. Grant served 2 terms as county commissioner, helping to shape the region's growth with wisdom and foresight. When news reached them in 1885 that Robert Keller had died in prison, Beatrice felt only a distant sadness for the man who had once been part of her life. That chapter was long closed, the pain transformed into wisdom and strength. On their 10th wedding anniversary, Grant surprised Beatrice with a small gold locket. Inside was a miniature painting of their 4 children on one side, and on the other, a tiny picture of the ranch house with the mountains behind it. "To remind you," he said as he fastened it around her neck, "that the greatest riches are the ones we build together." Beatrice touched the locket, then reached up to kiss her husband. "I've never forgotten," she whispered against his lips, "and I never will."